Hi, Craig again from GraniteWMS, and I want to talk about the implementation strategies and then some of the difficulties that we have around implementing a warehouse or a warehouse system. So what happens is when you implement the processes in the warehouse, you have to train the operators, but often you don't have the data, nor the labels, nor the setting to be able to train the operators. So what we typically do is set up a test system and a live system, and then you go about labeling things in the test environment so that you can train. But it becomes really difficult to get that training done if your data doesn't reflect what's actually happening in the warehouse. So we have two approaches. The first one is that we can train on a basic test environment. Then we do a wall-to-wall stock count and what we call initial take-on or take-on. That means that we label all the stock in the warehouse. And once you've done that, then you have a go-live weekend that you have done all the reconciliation of your stock, and then you start on the Monday morning and everyone does the processes that they've been trained. The problem with that approach is that they will make mistakes in the processes because it's new. They're not fast and they haven't gotten up to speed with how the system works yet or how even a scanner works. So they're going to make mistakes and it's going to slow things down. So while that is a valid approach and often it's the only approach that one can take, we believe that a phased approach is a better approach. Now in the phased approach, what we do is it's still a test environment in terms of the warehouse system, but we convert that over to live at some point. Now what happens is you do a full data take on, but not worrying too much about accuracy, knowing your accuracy is going to decrease as the guys start making mistakes and then increase over time. What we do is we do initial take on in the warehouse and we implement the processes and we train, but in the live environment, not necessarily integrating back to ERP, but live in terms of the warehouse. Again, remember, we're not focused on the accuracy, we focus on the accuracy of the process. So now you train the guy on the process. What will happen is you will find errors in the data, you will find bugs that may be in the processes that the implementation consultants overlooked. It gives them a chance to fix those. And sometimes there's a bit of stress because the guys need to get orders out, but the emphasis is on doing the process. Now if I come to a pallet and it hasn't got a label on, you can pick it manually and just skip. So we still walk around with our paper. We're not changing their process dramatically, we're just introducing the scanner process to start with. And that's phase one. We also try and keep those processes as simple as possible to start with, so the guys get used to the scanner. It's very easy to add an additional menu prompt or an additional process once they're used to using it and they're up to speed. Even just the keyboard is complex, so they get used to using it, and then implementing another process or a more complex process is easy. So we tend to want to go in phases. We tend to want to implement with a view to riding a bicycle rather than driving a Ferrari. And then later on, you upgrade so that you have more complexity in the system. Like for example, telling them where to go, optimizing whether to pick a full pallet versus a half pallet, etc. To start with, in this warehouse, for example, you can pick from any pallet. Later on, we will optimize that you can only pick from pallets that are open or bulk pick when it's a full pallet required for your order. Now, one of the implementation challenges that you find when you implement this way is that labels are incorrect on product. So you'll come to a pallet and there'll be no label on it. Or, like in this instance here, I've come to this pallet and there's two labels. So does the picker know which one to pick? The challenge that we have here is that there's two different lot numbers or batch numbers on this pallet. So the label represents a license plate. It's a license plate for this pallet, and this was a previous pallet that was here. They replenished, they put the full pallet in, and then they kept the label for the last box of the last pallet. And the reason that they kept it is because the lot number is different on the two pallets. Now when we're picking, what will happen is they'll take this box first, that's the older one, the older lot number, and then they will come and they will scan this one. And we have to make sure that this is accurate, And over time, during this method of implementation, we go about fixing stock in the warehouse. It gives us the opportunity to then teach the supervisors how to fix the stock. And once they have that tool set of whether to do a lookup, then do an adjustment, or do a scrap of a label, they've learned that because we're now giving them the opportunity to fix that, and we're giving them those tools. We're letting them think about license plates, accuracy of stock. And what we are focused on is getting the stock accurate after the processes are accurate. So in this instance, what I do is I take my scanner, I go on the menu to lookup, and I go and do a lookup on that specific label. It tells me the lot number, it tells me it's correct, it tells me the location, it's in the correct location, and it tells me there's one on that label. So that license plate represents this one box. I'm happy with that. I'm happy to leave that a license plate on the box like this, and that will be picked first. Then I go and do a lookup on this one, and I confirm that this quantity is 44. Now, we have to check that, so I do a count and I see that 44 is right, so I'm happy with that license plate. Now the strategy that they've taken here, initially we started off by sticking the license plate on the rack, but that's not a good idea. And why they did that is because they rip off the shrink wrap and then lose the label. We have transitioned, and again this is part of this phased approach, is that while you're doing it, you get their buy-in and their ideas on how to do this, which means that they are part of the implementation. We're not dictating how they do it, they're part of the decision-making process, so they take ownership of the system. Now the new way of doing this is that we're going to take one of the labels and staple it to the bottom, and then the other label will stay on the pallet. If this one gets removed because of shrink wrap or loss, we still have the one stapled to the pallet. We don't want it on the rack because when they replenish, they sometimes don't take the old one off the rack. Now, we have an additional problem on this pallet, is that this box is turned this way, and as it turns out, while I was checking this one, it's actually a different product. This box is not supposed to be here. The problem is that as it stands like that, someone would go and scan that and they would pick this and they wouldn't know any different. So what we do is we find a problem like this, we immediately take it out so that it's not part of the pallet and it can be dealt with. Now, one of the strategies that you can have is you can have your pickers as well as supervisors walking around with a red flag, and when they find a problem, rather than disrupting their process of picking, they just stick a red flag in, and then a supervisor comes and deals with red flag issues. And that's a great strategy for dealing with problems that the pickers find while they are going about learning the process. So just to recap, really important, focus on process first, then we focus on accuracy. During the process, we start fixing things, and that tends towards accuracy, and then when you start replenishing down full pallets, those are by nature accurate. Finally, after maybe a month of operation, we do a full wall-to-wall stock count. Now the nice thing about that is that full pallets don't need to be counted because they are virgin pallets. We scan the label and we are able to know that that pallet is accurate, so we only have to focus on broken pallets, and then we focus on pallets that are not in the warehouse. And our stock take or inventory count process does the work of removing pallets that you didn't find in the warehouse and focusing on accuracy of what you've got.